At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Join us and unwind with a good book. Welcome to Relaxing Reads.
Hi, it's Deb in Halifax.
Hi, it's Simone in Vancouver.
Hey, it's Tanya in Edmonton.
We are so excited to interview Marissa Stapley today, the author of The Lightning Bottles. Deb, why don't you give us a little synopsis on the book before we get started?
Okay, our latest read, The Lightning Bottles, comes from Marissa Stapley, and it's all about love, drugs, and rock and roll. Jane was once half of a famous duo from the Seattle grunge era of the 90s. Years later, she became perhaps the most hated and least understood woman in music. She was never as popular with fans as her bandmate and soulmate Elijah. They were on a high at the top of their game, and then that rise to fame came crashing down. Her husband and partner in music abruptly disappeared, and through the public hatred, all Jane really wanted was to retreat. What she doesn't anticipate is the bombshell that awaits her at her new home in the German countryside. There's a superfan, secret messages for Jane, and so much in between. A cross-continent road trip about two misunderstood outsiders brought together by their shared love of music.
Hi, Marissa.
Hello. So, Marissa Stapley, everything you throw our way, we are absolutely loving. You are one of our favorites. It's not just one of the world's favorites, and you've got bestsellers out there. But this is so interesting, this one, because just like a music concert, this book is an experience. I mean, we're all big music fans. Obviously, you are as well. So how did you come up with the idea? And tell us about the musicians or the industry reps that you chatted with before writing.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like I always say, like, The Lightning Bottles is it's the book of my heart. Like, they were all, pieces of me. But this one is that, like, it was born in my, grunge postered bedroom where I grew up in Stouffville. And, I was music obsessed, and it was a small town. So there really weren't a lot of other people who were as into the kind of music that I was into as I was. So, my mixtapes were like a work of art, and I would do things like, if I liked a guy, I would like create a mixtape and sort of like drop it at his feet to make sure I'm not.
Oh, I love you.
And like he picked it up, and probably chances are he'd be like, "You dropped this," and keep walking, right? But in my mind, it would be like, "Here's my soul. Like, this is who I am," So, so that was who I was, and I carry that 14, 15-year-old around. And also at that age, something, hugely formative in my teenage mind happened, which was the death of Kurt Cobain. And that really stuck with me. And I think the other side of that is, I was a big fan of Sinead O'Connor. I was also a big fan of Courtney Love and Hole. And these are women who were also vilified and kind of pushed to the margins. And I don't think I processed that at the time. But when I read Sinead O'Connor's memoir when it came out 4 years ago, and it just caused me to start thinking about the way women had been treated, and kind of under what I felt like was my watch, because I was so into that scene. I just started thinking, this book that, by the way, it had been living with me for a while, and these characters, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with them. I just thought, I've got to write this. This feels so important. So that's where the idea came from. So I've mentioned Courtney Love and Sinead O'Connor are really the muses for Jane, and then all of the, many female artists who I dedicate the book to from that era. And also, I thought about Kurt Cobain, but I did a lot of research about him, and it was so difficult and sad. And I think the addiction and mental illness, there's a level there that it's so complicated. So I also started thinking about Jeff Buckley, who also died at 27, and that's really the muse for Elijah's voice. So while all of this was kind of coming together in my mind, I turned to Alan Cross, who's a Canadian music alternative music expert. I spoke with him when the book was just in its conceptual stages, just to ask for insight into the scene because I have my memories that, he has all these facts. And then he was just very generous with his time. We spoke a few times, and he actually read an early copy of the book around the time when it was getting copy edited, just to make sure there were no factual errors, which I'm very proud to say there were not. I mean, he found like 10. They were very small, and I was like, oh yeah. But I was so proud of that, that getting and having access to him, and he has some really great stories to share as well.
He certainly does. That was actually one of the things I was going to ask you, because in your acknowledgments, you said that, you had spoken to Alan Cross, and the only thing he said to you was, quote, "Get it right."
Yeah.
So how did that sort of like help you formulate this story? Like, how did those words help you kind of?
And with all respect to Alan, too, I feel like I also saw it as a challenge. I was like, I can do that. Like, I'm going to do that. I can totally do that. But, and also I took to heart what he meant, because there are so many music books that are released and some things are glossed over or facts are not, correct. And I think it's an interesting scene, and this particular era was really important. So it was really important to me to try to get that right. Like, one of the stories that Alan told me very early on that stuck with me was, like, I asked him, like, tell me, what was it like as a DJ to play Smells Like Teen Spirit for the first time on the radio? And he told me that he received a CD from, the record companies would send these CDs out. Like, I feel like I have to explain this to my teenage kids, like how this would work. And they'd be like, these are the songs they're excited about that you can't get anywhere else. And Smells Like Teen Spirit was on it. And I'm going to say, for the sake of storytelling, it was track 4. And his program director came in and was like, hey, you may want to check out track 4. Like, it's a good one. So he decided to play it. The album hadn't come out yet. I think it was releasing that Tuesday. Let's say this was a Friday. So I don't know. Timelines maybe I shouldn't be focusing on. But he played the song, and he said he went to get a copy. By the time he came back, the lines were completely jammed. They were lit up. People were calling me like, what is that? What is that? And it continued throughout that day. The album then came out that Tuesday. He did Club NRG, I think it was NRG, on Friday, that like alternative club out near the airport, which I think all people of a certain age went to dance to alternative rock at. And he said that by Friday, everyone in that club knew the words to that song, and they were all like moshing. And it was just, he was like, I've never seen anything like that before or since. And my editors would often say to me, like, this stratospheric rise to fame you're describing, like, it doesn't feel realistic. And I was like, but this is what really happened. Like, this is how it happened with Nirvana. And I really wanted to use that because I think that's part of what the problem was for Kurt Cobain, was like, snap your fingers and all of a sudden people are singing all the words to also what wasn't the song that you expected was going to be a hit. I feel like I have so much to say, but also I listened to Courtney Love on Rob Harville's The 60 Songs That Explain the 90s, and Courtney Love does an episode. And the thing that she said that stuck with me, and she's talking about Curtis, she's like, I often wonder what would have happened, because he didn't want that song on the album. So like what would have happened, or if Come As You Are had been the first single, and it, like where would we be now? It's just interesting to think about, because that song tortured him for some reason. So, it's just there's so much story there. And so, yeah, like the question was like, to get it right is to really fully immerse yourself. And I did, but I was 14, and now
it's you're giving me chills just talking about that, because we were talking about, like, we discussed that in our conversation about the deaths that affected us. And of course, Kurt Cobain came up, and me being in Vancouver, so close to Seattle, it just felt like even more of a local connection, even though it's right. Not really. But it's like, those are the things that sit with you through your life, is when you remember those moments, and then there's such a big loss and there's that tragedy, and then you listen to that music and it takes you there. And even now, when it came up to, I think it was like recently the 30th anniversary of his passing, and then you hear that song again, it just takes you back, and you're living like that 10-year-old or 14-year-old girl all over again, experiencing it. Yeah. So it's nice to hear you kind of put that all into perspective on how it came to be in the novel. And then the other thing was the chat rooms. We went back to the world of chat rooms. Did you ever meet a love through a chat room, or make a connection like that? Like, I feel like I was meeting all the weirdos and creepers. I never met anyone.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, totally all the creepers. Like, and interestingly, some people are like, "Oh, you mean like AOL?" I'm like, "No, like this was this was like literally just like words would come up on your screen. It was like a black screen with yellow writing, and like the most you could do is if somebody used all the like symbols they could, some really smart techie people could create like a face or something, and it was definitely the creepers. Like I never met a love, but I did have a boyfriend. I lived in Stouffville and he lived in Lindsay, which really isn't that far, but we had to write letters. So I did have that letter writing experience, and I still have those letters. And actually, and it's very sweet, right? It's just very sweet and innocent. And also I remember that feeling like when you could, it was long distance to talk. So we'd write letters, and that feeling of anticipation. I really love those scenes in the book. But yeah, the chat room, I think people were connecting that way. And I think the connections over like video games, but also I think music. And I think that the internet has changed so much, right? Like that the 90s was the era we didn't realize what we were on the edge of. It was like the Industrial Revolution level change for the world. But that those innocent sort of first days where it was like you could be Jane sitting in your bedroom feeling totally alone and unseen, and you could find someone else who was like the same weird as you. And that's kind of a nice little like thing about the internet that still does happen, even with all of the kind of absolute like horse out of the barnness of it, where it's just
we were talking about the chat room as well, but Tanya and I both, come from different parts of the country, but both grew up in rural areas. So we didn't do the chat room thing. We wrote letters, and I had a bunch of pen pals. But then when I moved to the city and went to university in Halifax, and that's where I was sort of introduced to it as well. And I was telling the ladies, actually, I don't know if you were aware that Halifax was actually known as Seattle North in the 90s because of the bands that were coming out of here. And there was a huge grunge scene, and it was a great time to be going to university here, and the downtown scene was just kind of wild, but wonderful too.
I did not know that. That's really interesting. I have that 90s, that book Have Not Been the Same, the whole like this, like it's like this huge doorstopper about the Canadian 90s alternative music scene. But I just was I didn't end up reading the whole thing during research, so I think I might have missed that. That's so cool. Yeah. I wish I'd known that. Yeah. I would have had
Sloan,
to go to
Halifax. Is it like Sloan from Halifax? Was
I was going to say Sloan, yeah.
Yeah, Sloan, yeah. And Joel Plaskett, who has his own band, but he was in a couple of different bands, but it was, around the same time. So, I really appreciate it.
That's cool. That is cool.
I wonder, Marissa, like, just reading, I totally got Elijah. We were talking earlier, and I'm like, he's so sensitive. Like he was never meant to like, kind of have all this stuff happen to him. He just wanted to sing, and it was heartbreaking for me to read some of it because I just thought he's so damaged, and he's just like he wants to crawl back inside of himself. And throughout the novel, Jane is there, and she just, I guess because she's so in love with him, maybe you can explain that relationship. She, to her own detriment, tries to help him over and over and over, was never allowed to say that she wrote the songs. And I felt, for Jane, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish you'd just get your due, but even every kind of, hole that Elijah would go down, and she would be like, I got to pull him up. I said that I would. And it was all, and I'm just like, part of me was like, don't do it anymore. Don't do it. So, why did you have her constantly just always there for him? I don't know. Just.
Well, I mean, there were so many, and hopefully I can keep all that in my head because there's a lot to that question. And I think first of all, they were young, right? They were very young. And I think that when you're young like that, it's not especially reasonable. Like your head and your heart are not really communicating. I do think there's that sort of soulmate fated element that happens with them. So that is what was going on there. And then they were kind of thrown into this situation together while still very young, right? And so she wasn't exactly in an environment where, who would have ever been saying to her, this is like codependency and maybe you should be doing this or that. Like, I think that wasn't happening. I also think the reality is, the whole, like, she couldn't say she wrote the songs. Like, I don't think she necessarily really wanted that credit. I think it was more upsetting to him, right? When they were like, nobody really is going to want to know that, like, no one's going to want to headbang to like a girl's lyrics. Like that's peak 90s. That definitely happened somewhere in some boardroom in the 90s. And I think that, it didn't bother her, but it bothered him and it caused him to spiral. And then I think her fate was really entwined with his. Like, I don't think in that era, or really any era, could she just say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go on my own. Like, what would have become of her? Like, I don't think they would have been like, great, cool, Jane Pyre solo project, like her fortunes were tied to his. And I do think that society, we to this day, unfortunately, do kind of romanticize that broken guy thing. And I think in a contemporary, lens, like look at The White Lotus, look at the fact that, spoiler alert, but like Rick and Chelsea, that's not romantic. And yet the internet was like, oh my God, Greek tragedy, so romantic. And I was like, what are you talking about? But it's not romantic. Like, even my daughter was like, oh, it's complicated because he had anger issues. I'm like, how is it okay? Like, that's, but they had one nice breakfast and then
the rest of the time it was terrible.
Right. Like, but I do think that we're conditioned to that. So I don't, like, in writing about that relationship the way that I did, I'm certainly not like, this is great. Like, what happens to Elijah happens, and Elijah has to go on a journey to, either he's not alive or he can become worthy of her. Like, that's what that's all about. So yes, like, their stuff was bad and she was enabling him, and then everything happened I painted it that way for a reason, and then I made like extreme things happen for a reason, because I'm well aware that that's not it, right? Like, I have a radio DJ friend who interviewed me, and he's like, Elijah's so charming and like he seems so great, but like I am not introducing him to my friends. I'm like, exactly, like he's so unsuitable. Like, that's just the way it is, because part of the reason you're not introducing him to anyone is because everyone will fall in love with him as well. So
it's kind of like the whole Kim thing. Yeah. Kim, didn't want to see his success, but wanted to be around him. Yeah. Interesting.
You had some great characters. I do have to ask you, like, I know that you probably based, your characters on real people. The one that I we're talking about earlier, Maxime, in the French punk band. Did you base that character off somebody? Because
Tanya wants to meet that person.
I think I want to meet him. I know. Because he kind of was doing the grunt. He was doing the punk thing, and then he became an artist, and he kind of grew up, and he was just dead sexy to me.
I know.
Anyway.
I agree. I feel like maybe like in an alternate universe where like Jeff Buckley had not died, maybe that I actually think of all the people, like I don't have a specific person in mind for him, except that he definitely is a type, and he's definitely like out of that era. Like, that type is definitely my catnip too. I'm like, and I really wanted to present her with a very nice alternate path, and to have that moment where somebody else saw her and was like, you know what, it's not just the Elijah show. Like, I see you, and I really do, and I always have. Like, I wanted that for her, even though I wanted that for her. And I kind of also always think about my books as TV shows now, so I feel like the Lightning Bottles has been optioned. So I feel like in a TV show, like, we need that, right? Because like nothing like a love triangle, you know what I mean? I love a love triangle in TV, and he's perfect. So I kind of wanted to create myself like, here he is, and if there's season 2, he's definitely on the scene, so
I love this. I love that you're always writing novels for us, because it seems like you're always busy. And
when she says us, she means the three of us.
Yeah. everybody. But it's, because when we last spoke to you around the holidays, you told us about the news that was coming out, and that was about Lucky through Reese Witherspoon's production company, which is amazing. Anya Taylor-Joy. That's going to be great. So now to hear this as well, this is huge news for you. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, I don't know. Like they say, does lightning strike twice?
Twice?
Does not strike twice. But like maybe lightning will strike twice, because I now see how hard it is for something to actually get made. But also, I'm meeting people all the time. I'm really in that world. So yeah, I should figure out who would play Maxime. He's important, right? I think we need.
Yeah.
Tanya will be happy to be at the auditions for that. Yes.
I can help you with that. I think. But who would play Elijah? I mean, I was actually thinking of he just played Bob Dylan in a bio.
I did.
Timothée Chalamet, but I'm like, he's already played Bob Dylan, so what do you do with that?
I even kind of thought I need it to be somebody with universal appeal, so even like a Jacob Elordi type. The producers had mentioned there's some like Green Day stage play, and whoever plays Billy Joe, and some young guy who I haven't seen him in much else, but he does seem to have that charisma. I also feel like he's too old, but Jeremy Allen White has that sort of he's just so kind of cute and broken.
Cute and broken. I love it.
Cute and broken.
Yeah.
That should be a shirt.
I just want to take care of them. Yeah.
I don't know why I ask myself that. Like, why? But we do feel it. And I know when I was a certain age, there was nothing like a fixer-upper to just get my heart, like, really going. Why? We need to ask ourselves that. We need to figure out what that.
Yeah. Well, you let us know, and we can await that news. And what's next for you, Marissa? Another holiday read, I hear?
Yeah, so I have a holiday book called Christmas at the Ranch coming out in the fall, which I love, which is set in Halliburton, my cottage hometown. I'm working on a sequel for Lucky, so there should be news about that. That's my plan. Yeah, I'm really, really, really into that. I'm excited.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Wow.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. We love talking to you. It's just, you always give us such great insight. You give us such great novels, and we're big fans. So yeah, we love the book, and thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Marissa. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. She's delightful.
She's amazing.
She really is. She's awesome. I'm so excited for her.
I know. Me too. Okay.
Awesome.
Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for kicking back and relaxing with us. We hope you'll join us again on Relaxing Reads.